This video is about the axis menu. So let's take a look at it now. The axis menu is up here. Let's click on it. And we notice we have a series of choices. Autoscale channel set right now to all. Autoscale, which also has a hotkey of Control A. Grid lines, we can set the X and Y grid lines. The manual shift plot amount, which we'll get into, very interesting by the way. The y-axis, we can change the minimum and maximum values. Right now they're 0 to 250, but we can change those as well. The analog label, we can actually label the y-axis. We can change the y-axis from a standard scalar plot to a logarithmic plot, and we can also control the decimal points that we show on our y-axis from 0.0 to 0. Any number of zeros after the decimal. We also have control of the time base from hours, minutes, seconds, and real time. We can change our X time minimum and X time maximum, and we can also change our time axis label. Now, if some of these things sound familiar to you, they should be, because we've already seen them in our configuration pull-down menu under axis. Here we can put in the window title, but once again we can change the analog maximum and minimum. Right now they're 0 to 250 as shown. We can change to a log axis or the scalar axis. We can also change the time minimum and time maximum. We can also select between real time, seconds, minutes, and hours, and change the grid line numbers, and also label the X and Y axis as well. So we have two ways of doing this, but the axis menu has a few other neat features that we want to get into at the moment. So before we do, let's start some plotting going, and that will basically illustrate more of some of these features that I'd like to point out to you. We're plotting 10 channels of analog data right now. As you see, they're all sine waves, and some of the sine waves are clipping up there at the maximum 250 point. So the sine waves are actually going in amplitude above 250. But there's a way to control that as well, which I want to show you now. One of the first items we have is Autoscale channel. So let's click on it, and that is, as the prompt tells us, we can enter the channel number to autoscale 0 to 99, or enter the word all for all the channels. And these will only plot for the visible channels, and once again our visible channels are 0 through 9 at this moment. Let's type in all, as it said before. So we'll type in all, and either click the OK or hit the Enter key. I'll click the OK. Nothing's really happening. What we've really done here is simply set up the fact that we want to scale all the channels automatically. So to do that, come up here again to Autoscale and click Autoscale, or click Control A. We'll click Autoscale right now. And there we see our y-axis now has changed from 0 to 250 to 16 to 223. We have adjusted, rather, the y-axis to scale to the maximum and minimums of the sine wave data that we're plotting now. Now we can go back to this, and instead of saying all, we can just choose a channel to autoscale to, and let's choose channel 0. Type in 0, click OK. Come back here to the axis menu, click Autoscale again, and there we have it. Now our scaling right now is 46 to 157. Now what we have to do from time to time in autoscaling is we have to refresh this. So let's do it with a Control A this time. I'm going to hit Control A several times now. And as you see, the y-axis changed from what it was to 46 to 173. So what we're doing right now is we're scaling the y-axis to fit channel 0 specifically. And channel 0 is this black colored sine wave here. Okay, let's go down and let's go to grid lines. And here we have grid lines for X and Y. So we can enter the number of grid lines we want to see. Right now we're set at 10. Let's go and enter 40. Let's see what's happened. All right, there we have, instead of 10 vertical grid lines, we now have 40 vertical grid lines. Go back to the axis again. Go back to grid lines. Let's try y-axis. Let's enter 40 again. All right, now we have 40 and 40. So we have a much finer grid line package on our screen. Now to kind of get out of the auto scaling feature, we can go back here to, I'm going to skip over, by the way, I'm going to skip over manual shift plot amount. I'm going to get to that in a little bit, but I want to talk about the Y minimum and maximum scales right now. Let's choose Y minimum. Right now it's set to 46. Let's get it back to 0 and hit enter. Now we're back to 0 on the minimum. Let's change the maximum. And the maximum right now is 173. Let's change that to 250. All right, now we have 0 to 250 like we started out from before. What we can also do, as we've seen before, is change from a scalar plot to a logarithmic plot. And here we are, just by clicking this choice, we can now plot our data logarithmically rather than in the normal manner. Control L is the hotkey for that. I'm going to hit Control L again. Here we're back and forth. We can switch back and forth very quickly just by hitting the Control L key to switch from scalar plotting to logarithmic plotting. Now, decimal point mask, 0.0. What does that mean? Well, let's find out. As you'll notice, looking at the Y scale, we are going from 0.0 to 250.0 because our decimal point mask is set to a 0.0 type of a framework. We can change that. Let's go to 0.00. Hit the OK, and there we are. Now we're going from 0.00 to 250.00. This is kind of important when you're shifting the plot up and down using the up and down arrow keys here, because if you really want extreme resolution, you'll be able to get it by changing your decimal mask value from the default of 0.02, whatever you want to really change it to. Okay, now let's continue with Timebase. Timebase, like we've seen before, can be in hours, minutes, seconds, or real time. Right now we're plotting data in seconds, so let's choose minutes. But look at what we're doing right now. We're plotting data in seconds from 0 to 120. So if we choose minutes, then our scale changes from 0 to 2 minutes, which is equivalent to 0 to 120 seconds. If we go back here and go back to Timebase and choose hours, then we're at 0 to 0.03 hours, which is effectively about 2 minutes worth of plotting. And then, of course, we can come here and go back to Timebase again, choose real time, or hit Control R, and that will switch between real time and either hours, minutes, or seconds, whichever was last. Since we had hours last, hours will show up. So I'm hitting Control R right now, and you can see that the time axis is changing between hours and real time. We can also come along here and change our time axis. Right now it says hours. We can change that to, let's say, HRS. And there it is, HRS. We'll proceed now up and do the same thing with our Y-axis. We skipped over the Y analog label, so let's change it to something appropriate. All right, since we're plotting analog data, let's just say analog, A-N-A-L-O-G, data. Hit the OK, and there we have labeled our Y-axis as analog data. Now for this manual shift plot amount feature. Right now we have it set at 20%, but what does that really mean? Well, what it really means has to do with these arrow keys, both for the time axis and for the y-axis. Let's look at the time axis for a moment. And before we do that, to make it more effective, let's change our time base back to seconds. Okay, now we're 0 to 120 seconds again. This will be much more descriptive at this point. So if we come in here to axis, and we can then verify that we have a manual shift plot amount of 20%. Now I'm going to change that in a bit. I just want to show you we're at 20%. If we come here and click our shift arrow key, we notice that our plot shifts to the right. There we come, at 20%. For example, let's go back here to 0. 20% of 120 is 24 seconds. So if it's going to shift, it's going to shift 24 seconds. And that means if we shifted it that way, now our time axis instead of 120 is 96. We can do the same thing for the y-axis. We can shift up or down by 20%. Here we're shifting up by 20%. Actually shifting the plot up by 20%, shifting it down by 20%. Now we can come back here and change this amount. Let's make it easy to calculate mentally. Let's change it to 10%. Okay, now it's 10%. So if we want to shift now, our shifting is going to be 10% rather than 20%. So we're really shifting half as much. So if you want to shift data, move it around on the screen to be able to see what's been plotted before and so forth. And actually, if you want to stop the plot, which we're going to do now, okay, then we can shift the data back and forth by 10%. We can expand the time frame, shift the data some more. Whoops, wrong way. Okay. And we can change that, of course, to any kind of percentage we want. So that's the advantage of the shifting maximum. And there we go with the Y direction. So the axis menu does have some features that are really not duplicated anywhere else on the interface. So please be aware of that. And come back to the axis pull-down menu whenever you want to use these particular features.